Welcome back, friends, to the Love Your People Well podcast. This is episode 215, and we are going to tackle the question of how to avoid the bickering, the conflict, the drama that can so easily sneak up over the holidays and replace the bickering with bonding, with meaningful family time. This podcast is coming out in November, so you might be prepping for Thanksgiving, Christmas. This is a time of year when there's a lot of extra family time, and that can be a great blessing. We want to enjoy it, but we're not going to enjoy it if everyone is spending the time whining and complaining and just kind of getting on each other's nerves. And most families really enjoy time together, and yet the more time we spend together, the easier it is to fall into some of those less than perfect holiday moments. And so today I want to share a few tips for how to avoid the bickering and the conflict and the arguing, and a few tips for how to boost the bonding and the connection during the holidays. This podcast is all about enjoying family life as we build up healthy, happy, and holy family relationships. The holidays are a great time to do that, and so we do not want to let the emotions or the conflict or those type of problems steal the joy and the connection that is a really unique opportunity during the holidays. So if you're new here to the Love Your People Well podcast, I'm so glad you're here. My name is Jess. I am a marriage and family therapist in South Carolina. I'm a mom of 4, I'm a pastor's wife, and I love the holidays. And so I'm excited to share a few tips and ideas with you. I will say, as a family counselor, holiday-related issues, family gatherings, it brings a lot of people in the door of the counseling room, not necessarily as the main cause of people having struggles, but for so many families, this is a really common background issue, or sometimes not so much in the background. And so it is my goal today that we'll avoid the bickering and the conflict and boost the bonding and the connection. Now, if you want more resources, I would encourage you to head over to loveyourpeoplewell.com. I've got a freebie there that's going to be really helpful with especially the avoiding the bickering and the arguments. I've got a free 1-page simple cheat sheet, conflict resolution cheat sheet that just is going to walk you through those hot moments when your emotions are climbing and kind of kick pause on the conflict and restore some peace in those family dynamics. So definitely grab that free conflict resolution cheat sheet. And while you're there on the website, if communication is a big issue, if emotions are a big issue in your family, we've got some great devotionals there on loveyourpeoplewell.com. And my Advent and Christmas devotionals are there now as well. There's a women's, a men's, a kids, or a family bundle because they're meant to go together. And I'll chat about that a little bit more because that type of an activity, a devotional, a journal, something specifically for the holidays that can boost family bonding can sometimes be a great way to kind of add in something fun and meaningful that really keeps everyone centered on the actual purpose, the actual meaning of the holidays. So lots of resources there for you at loveyourpeoplewell.com. And the scripture that I want us to pull off of today, or I should say maybe jump off from today, as we think about the bickering and the conflict and how do we handle that at the holidays, is from Matthew chapter 5. There is a section there, and it's several verses. I'm going to read it, and we're going to move forward from there to talk about how do we take this wisdom from the Lord and learn how to apply that to our family dynamics. Because it's not specifically talking about family, but there's so much richness there. So in Matthew chapter 5, I'm starting at verse 21. Jesus is talking. He's giving the Sermon on the Mount, probably the most famous of his sermons. It's several chapters there in the book of Matthew. And chapter 5 is kind of near the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And what Jesus says is, You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift." So that's from Matthew chapter 5. And I do hope that murder is not the type of family conflict that you're worried about, because if it is, just go ahead and stop this podcast and call a counselor and reach out for help. That's a super serious concern. We all know that that's not the level of conflict that we're talking about here. But we are absolutely called to live out what Jesus is describing here, and that anger and that name calling and that harshness in our relationships. We are called to cast that aside. And when there is some kind of conflict, some kind of tension in a relationship, to prioritize resolving that and restoring the relationship. And one of the words in there, Raka, just as far as what does that mean? And then it says, "You fool." That's probably more of our vernacular today. We don't want to call our family members fools. But Raka was a really derogatory term that basically was telling someone you're totally worthless. It was someone that you thought was really just not worth your respect or your time. And so Jesus is connecting this with even that extreme end of murder, that if we are name calling like this, if we're looking at other people and treating them as if they are worthless, that's just as bad. And it's really just a spectrum there, and it's still sin. It is still a problem, and it's definitely not building up a healthy, happy, and holy relationship. And so I think even without necessarily using the same words in your family today, we can just call that name calling and that negative attitude toward one another. That is not the holiday that I want, and it's definitely not the holiday that you want. I remember when I was a kid, there were several years when my uncle and his family would come visit us. They would have to drive many, many hours. They would come visit us for Thanksgiving, especially. There were some birthdays around that time of year. And I love my uncle and I love his family. And they tend to communicate in just a very sarcastic way with each other. That's very normal for their family. And I remember being a kid and sitting around the Thanksgiving table or having birthday dinners together, and the way that my cousins would talk to each other or even talk to their parents, and I was just floored. Like, how are you using this kind of language with each other? And every family culture is going to have their own ways of communicating with each other, of kind of teasing each other a little bit or things like that. We've had some episodes recently on passive aggressive communication, so you might want to circle back and hop into those if that's maybe hitting a button for you. But I remember being so struck by how they were talking to each other. And I knew if I was talking to my brother that way, there would be a lot of anger, there'd be a lot of conflict happening. It never really had gotten to that point, but it was very normal for them. And so you need to know your own family culture, of course. And that is what I want you to have in mind as we talk through some tips for how to avoid the bickering, the conflict, the arguments, and how to boost bonding and connection during the holidays, how to avoid those "you fool" type of moments, and how to connect more instead. And so let's start with this topic of avoiding. I want to share 3 tips to avoid, 3 tips to boost and strengthen your relationships during the holidays. And then we're going to wrap that up with just the number one thing that's going to help on both ends, going to help you avoid, going to help you strengthen and do what you want to do, enjoy family life during the holidays. We will close out with that number one thing, but it applies to both. But let's start with avoiding. How can we prepare today and leading up to the holiday events that are going to go on in ways that help us avoid the conflict and the sibling squabbling and the arguments and those type of things. And the first thing I would encourage you to do is to plan ahead for the hot spots. You know your people. You know your kids. You know your husband. You know your extended family. Are your cousins super sarcastic or not? That's my family dynamic when I was a kid. But what's yours? When are your kids most likely to bicker and fight? What is the hot button topic that you wish he would never bring up, but Uncle Bob can never stop talking about it during the Thanksgiving dinner? Like, are you expecting to travel and have some disrupted sleep? Do your kids handle the sugar rush of Christmas cookies very poorly? Like, what are the weak spots, the hot spots for your family? And plan ahead for those now, which might be that you could put some things in place to avoid them, to change the travel schedule, or to avoid the family gathering that everybody just always argues at. But it also might mean that you're coming up with a plan for, okay, when Uncle Bob brings up that crazy topic that I wish he wouldn't talk about, what could I say? What could I do that's going to change the direction of the conversation instead of everyone just getting upset? So plan ahead for those hot spots, those weak spots for your family gatherings during the holidays. Number 2 here, to avoid that bickering and that conflict, is to keep your expectations realistic. We talked last week about avoiding stress during the holidays, and one of those key pieces is knowing what are your actual priorities so you can say yes to those and say no to the other stuff. And as you're prioritizing, knowing what your expectations are and keeping them realistic is going to just keep the temperature low. It's going to help everyone be less stressed, help everyone just not feel so on edge, not feel so anxious, not feel so stressed out. And so I mean things like, if you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner and you're stirring the gravy, at least the way my mom always made it, you have to stir it nonstop or else it's going to get lumpy. She didn't want it lumpy. But if you need to pause that because there's a character issue going on, your kids are fighting with one another, you need to address that. Well, which of those is going to be your priority? And having a realistic expectation for myself, I've got 4 little kids. None of them are 5. They're all under age 5. There will be some moment as I'm cooking Thanksgiving dinner where they're arguing or they're bickering or, they're starting down that path. And if I'm expecting this is going to be perfect, everything will be picture perfect, it'll be exactly what we want, then that moment is a lot more likely to stress me out. Now I'm getting upset. Now I'm getting angry. Everything starts falling apart. But if I can expect ahead of time, what is this realistically going to look like? And I can plan to avoid the hot spots or the weaknesses or the things I know are going to be triggers, are going to be difficult. That's not always going to work. And so being realistic about what are we trying to do? What are the priorities? How do we make this quality without expecting it to be perfect? It's going to take a load off everyone's shoulders and help all of you avoid the conflict and the stress and actually be able to enjoy yourself. And then the third tip here, so this is still how do we avoid the bickering and the conflict? The third thing I would encourage you to do is to intentionally get some one-on-one time with your people. This is especially true with our kids. Kids need attention. And when the holidays are busy, you might have extra people coming in, there's extra things on the schedule, there's a lot going on. Sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves or our family to kind of hit all the high notes, do everything nostalgic, do all the traditions. It can be a stressful time for kids, and they are not in their same rhythm, the same routines, things are a little bit different. And so giving that intentional time and attention to your kids, to your spouse, even to the Lord, to your own quiet time and devotional time, that's going to be so helpful. Kind of filling up everyone's love tank so that when there is a stressor or things aren't going well or the car breaks down or it snows and you weren't expecting it or whatever happens, you've got a little more, margin. You can focus on the family time, knowing everyone has gotten that one-on-one connection time. A lot of times we start bickering and arguing because we're feeling ignored. We're feeling left out. We're feeling unnoticed. So prioritize, even if it's quick, some one-on-one time with your kids, with your husband, with yourself. You might need a little self-care plan going into the holidays. But these three things are going to really help you avoid the bickering, right? And so we talked about planning ahead for the hot spots, keep your expectations realistic, get some one-on-one time with people. That helps us avoid it. And again, the tip that I'll share right at the end is probably number one, but it's for both of these areas. So let's kind of turn the corner and think also we can avoid some of the bickering and arguing, but how do we also intentionally boost, lean into, emphasize the bonding, the connection, those meaningful moments in your family life at the holidays? And the first tip I would highlight here is to focus on listening to other people more than talking. Everybody wants to feel heard. Everybody has a story that they want to share. And a really great way to help people feel connected with each other is to listen. Now, you can't force your kids to listen to each other or anything like that, but you can control yourself. And taking that time to ask questions and just seek to know someone, understand someone with your kids, with your husband, with your extended family. Focus on listening more than talking. They're going to feel connected. You're going to know more. You're going to feel more connected with them. But also, you might, sneaking back over to avoiding the bickering, you might pick up on some tensions or some frustrations that you can address before there's the name calling and the yelling or things like that are escalating. But the second tip here for boosting that family bonding is to talk about, so you're listening more than talking, but when you are talking, talk about the good stuff. Focus what you are sharing on what you're thankful for, or complimenting other people, connecting people, highlighting and noticing out loud. Are the kids sharing with each other or with their cousins from out of town? Are they playing well together? Are they helping in some way? Don't just take those things for granted. Don't just let them slide under the radar. Even if it's something that they do all the time, it's not new, it's not different, you can still say thank you. You can still praise them for it, highlight it, especially at the holidays. People want to be around other people who make them feel good. And so you're really going to boost that quality time, that connection time with your family. If you're listening, you're seeking to let them feel heard, valued, cared about. And then when you are talking, you're sharing all the good stuff, complimenting them, saying thank you for things. You're really just praising God, praising this person with your words. And then the third thing here is to don't let people get away with it, right? I think it's easy at the holidays to just kind of push stuff under the rug. We don't want to deal with it right now. We only see Uncle Bob every few months or only once a year. This is not the time to have all the drama. But when there is bickering or when there is frustration, I think we need to follow the wisdom that Jesus is sharing there in Matthew 5. Now, he's talking about going to the altar to give a tithe, give a gift to God. And if you realize then, my brother's upset with me, my sister's upset with me, leave your gift, go resolve, restore that relationship, then come back and give your gift to the Lord. But that same wisdom applies to us. It is more important to address a character issue or a hurt in the relationship and to restore that, to deal with that. That is far more important than sitting down for that big turkey dinner the minute the turkey is done and everything is hot and fresh. Yeah, you want to do that. You want to enjoy the family time. But one of the best ways to not only stop the bickering, but really boost that connection and that bonding time is to not let people get away with it. If someone's frustrated, deal with it. If someone is struggling, comfort them, reach out to them. If there's bickering going on, stop it. Step in. Don't just tell them to handle it. Take the time to go, to be with them, to help. And then you can come back together to, as Matthew 5 says, to present your gift to the Lord, to present the food to the family, to enjoy that holiday moment. But I said I was saving the best for last. So we had 3 tips there to avoid conflict and bickering, 3 tips to boost the family bonding. But the number one thing that's going to help you do both of those is to pray. To take your family holidays, the big events, the small moments, everything in between, to take it to the Lord. Pray before, pray during, pray after, especially if there is conflict starting. Just kind of hit that pause button. Ask the Lord for wisdom, for help, for guidance. If it's the aftermath of a big fallout or a big argument, pray for forgiveness and for healing. The Lord wants your family to be connected. He does not want you calling each other, you fool. We see that right there in Scripture. He would rather you leave that time with him or that big, meaningful, special event, leave that to go restore the relationship and then come back and enjoy it. So I hope, friends, that a few of these tips might be helpful for you. And if you're like a reader, getting that reminder would be helpful. Pretty much every episode is there on the blog as well. So you can head over to, again, loveyourpeoplewell.com, grab that free conflict resolution cheat sheet, grab a devotional to do for yourself or even with your whole family, that meaningful thing to gather everyone together and focus on the Bible. Every day for the month of December, there's that Bible reading, reflection questions, prayer prompts. Again, a women's version, men's version, kids version, or a family bundle. Get a discount there for the whole family to boost that bonding and walk forward together, to get closer to each other as you draw closer to Christ at the Christmas season, the holiday season. And then, there's the blog, there's other devotionals. All of that is over at loveyourpeoplewell.com. And I'm going to wrap this up here. But we will be back on Friday with a short word of prayer, praying for our family time at the holidays. So subscribe to the show if you haven't done that yet. And until then, hugs and blessings to you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.